I'm humbled, I'm embarrassed by some of your compliments. Really, this has been a partnership for many years. As you said, 2013 was when we were first introduced or thrown in, shall I say, to the fire in terms of the work that we've been doing in cybersecurity. So just as Josh talked about this morning, you're really reflecting on this being a decade-long endeavor for us. I've got a whole slew of emotions as well. And I'll start off by saying that with the omnibus coming into law, when it was first announced back at the end of December, folks that know me, folks that interacted with me at the time know how giddy I felt. You know, this was just extraordinary. We had been trying so hard, working so hard to make this moment come, and I just was entirely suffused with this excitement, this delight, and this happiness, and a sense that we are truly on the cusp of being able to enter this era of great promise in terms of advances in these extraordinary medical technologies and what they bring to patients, and at the same time, concurrently, to think about how those wonderful technologies can be built with security integrated within them from the start. So that was, kind of a key moment for us. And what I would say is that, while it's been 10 years, to get to this point, and truly it feels like forever. In some regards, I think about this as though we have, completed season 1, and people might ask and wonder, is this anticlimactic for the FDA? I would say absolutely not. Season 1, maybe that chapter is over, and as we look towards what comes next, what that brings, and as we enter what I'll call here season 2, we recognize that in many regards, the true work is first beginning. The heavy lifting is first starting now with respect to the implementation of the omnibus. And in many regards, this really is an inflection point for us. I call this moment transformative. Transformative for us at CDRH and FDA because we've been, through these years, since 2013, a small and skeletal team of folks who've worked very, very, very hard. And as a result of the omnibus, this has been transformational. As a result of being given appropriations and authorities, we move from a team to the establishment of a program. And I'm extremely blessed to have many members, and I'll say many, we've got now more than a handful of members of our CyberMed team, or now program, who are actually in the room with us today. I want to call out Jessica Wilkerson, Afton Ross. We have Monroe, Arvin, and I'm not sure if we have anybody else right now at the moment, but it is extremely encouraging to see the direction that we're going. And I am not using hyperbole when I say that this is very much a transformational moment for us. But I want to take a kind of a step back, because we didn't just get here, obviously, overnight, and take stock of how we got here, what that journey was like, and rewind a bit, if you will, before we move forward and talk about the road ahead. We know that these new responsibilities that we have been given, that we have been entrusted with respect to the omnibus, is of a very serious and important nature. And in undertaking these responsibilities, we also recognize that all eyes are upon us. And so with that, let's talk about why is medical device security important. This is something that we have been obviously shouting from the rooftops for many years already. Can't underscore how integral it is that we consider medical device cybersecurity as part of safety and effectiveness. And you've heard us say over and over again that cyber safety is a part of patient safety, is an integral part of patient safety, and one that we will continue to emphasize and continue to underscore. We have historically found 510K pre-market submissions to be what's called NSC, not substantially equivalent, as well as the higher class, the class 3 devices, pre-market approval devices, to be not approvable on the basis of concerns related to cybersecurity. So there's a history here of work that's been done upon which we continue to build. Again, tracking back in this history, going back in time, just to provide, again, further context here, we have issued several final cybersecurity guidances. We have the final pre-market guidance that was issued back in 2014, and this is a cornerstone document that I will refer to throughout the rest of this talk as well, because of the important role that it plays as a final guidance, and one that therefore has been in its implementation, and is one that reviewers utilize on a regular basis in terms of assessing for cybersecurity within a medical device. And then back in 2016, we also issued both the draft and final of the post-market guidance related to cybersecurity. So once more, we've got that total product lifecycle approach issued in final guidance between the pre-market and the post-market back in recent years. Just a minute. Now, this is important because, when we go back several years, what we were hearing a lot about is, well, what is the device? What can the device, the design of the device, how is it intended versus what that device is actually able to do? And there was a fair amount of, I'd say, discordance between the two. Important for us to have gotten that message out, number one, that the design of that device must include the concerns around cybersecurity from the very beginning. And that looking back on performance of devices or surveillance of devices and utilizing past history is not an effective way to be thinking about the future of security. What do I mean by that? We've talked a lot about you cannot use probabilistic determinations of what might have happened or might not have happened related to cyber vulnerabilities within devices in order to determine whether that should influence the design of that device going forward from a cybersecurity perspective. This notion that, nobody would ever do anything, that there would never be any, first of all, malicious or intended use from a cybersecurity perspective, is one that we have had to, again, debunk, given the evolving cyber threat landscape. And so as we further train our reviewers internally within the FDA, it is around shifting that mindset and recognizing that the design of the device has to account for what that device could potentially be able to do, whether it was perhaps intended that way initially or not. One has to think about that threat landscape. And so where are we with respect to the pre-market guidances that have been issued to date? As I mentioned earlier, there's a 2014 guidance that has been finalized. We then issued a 2018 draft and held a public workshop in 2019 for those who remember, who were there, and solicited a lot of public comment and feedback during that period of time. And last April, a year ago, it was at CyberMed Summit that we presented the 2022 draft of the pre-market guidance, to which there also has been an entire public comment period. What does that mean in terms of implementation? This is important, especially for our manufacturers to understand. So the 2014 final guidance is still in effect. And that should be a guidance that one looks towards as far as implementation of the omnibus. The 2018 draft served a very important function in terms of, again, beginning to advance the maturity and expectations that we have of manufacturers in medical device cybersecurity, and to, again, get important feedback there. That draft, however, is now superseded by the 2022 draft. The 2022 draft, however, right now remains presently draft. It's not been finalized. What does that therefore mean from an implementation perspective? We always say that a guidance that's out in draft is not for implementation. So it's an important resource, a reference to use. It does identify the evolving thinking that we have had over the years, and certainly if you have not had visibility of that guidance, absolutely would recommend that you become familiar with it, but it is not for implementation. In fact, what we have said publicly is that the FDA intends to publish the final guidance, the final pre-market guidance, in 2023. It is on what's called our priority A list for guidances. So that is our intention, that the 2022 draft will be finalized in 2023. And once that is published and in final, then that becomes the guidance for implementation purposes. With that, it is important for us to consider how we roll in or fold in, if you will, aspects of the omnibus requirements into that guidance. And so there'll be, stay tuned in terms of how that will roll out, but that is the direction that we are heading in. There are an abundance of pre-market guidances that are out, that have been published by the Center for Devices Radiological Health, that are, while perhaps not central to cybersecurity, that are very much related and that are taken into account as part of the reviews of medical devices as they concern software, as they concern interoperability. And you can see this kind of smattering of guidances that are illustrated on this slide. So that's kind of where we've gotten up to. Now going to pivot in terms of the road ahead as a result of the omnibus and what we have already put out there and the direction that we're going. So Section 3305 of the omnibus, which is ensuring cybersecurity of medical devices, is incorporated into the Food and Drug Omnibus Reform Act, which is called FDORA. And this law was signed into effect December 29th of 2022 with a 90-day timeframe for its official implementation, which took us to March 29th, just last month. The new section 524B, ensuring cybersecurity of devices, applies prospectively. It does not therefore apply to those submissions that are present that came in prior. It doesn't also apply retroactively, but it applies kind of going forward. to submissions for what are called in the statute cyber devices under the different types of submission mechanisms that the FDA receives for medical devices, be it 510K, de novo, HDEs, PDPs, and PMA pathways. The statute also defines or lists the kind of characteristics of what a cyber device is. And you can see here includes software validated, installed, or authorized by the sponsor as a device or in a device. It has the ability to connect to the internet. And third, it contains any such technological characteristics validated, installed, or authorized by the sponsor that could be vulnerable to cybersecurity threats. The language on this particular slide is taken right out of the statute. And what I want to kind of highlight here on this slide in particular is design, develop, and maintain processes and procedures to provide a reasonable assurance that the device and related systems are cyber secure. And one might ask, so what does that reasonable assurance mean? You know, what is FDA looking for in terms of a device or related system demonstrating that it's cyber secure? So this is gonna, take us a little bit back again to the 2014 guidance, which, as I said, becomes that foundational document. We state in the 2014 guidance that FDA expects manufacturers to demonstrate that their device was designed to be secure. All right, so what does that mean, that it's designed to be secure? Well, number one, that there's information included within the submission to demonstrate that all the appropriate risks were considered. How do we do that? Well, this is often done through threat modeling, right? Threat modeling and cybersecurity risk assessment documentation. Then, kind of at that next step up, once one has considered all of the appropriate risks through threat modeling or other means, then what we're looking for is that there is adequate information, adequate design information to demonstrate that those identified risks were appropriately mitigated through the design and development of the device. How is this accomplished? This is often accomplished through device and software design documentation, including the architecture information. Then let's take this up to the next level, the next step. One must be able to demonstrate that there was adequate testing to be done, showing that the cybersecurity controls that were and capabilities that were put in place as part of the design, that they are working as they are supposed to in terms of the design. So what does this include? Well, this can include both white box and black box testing, penetration testing, fuzz testing, as well as your standard V&V verification and validation testing. And then taking this up further to that next level, that the documentation include that management plan, that risk management plan to ensure that devices remain cyber secure. And so this would include that aspect of making available post-market updates and patches to the device and the related systems. And as you can see here, it splits into A and B, whether it is depending upon the criticality of the vulnerability. 524B also includes providing to the Secretary a software bill of materials, and then the potential under number 4, the allowance that was given to the agency in order to put in place additional regulations as that would become, or if that should become necessary. So back on March 29th, when the omnibus went into full implementation, we issued what's called an immediately implementable II guidance. It's a final guidance, and this guidance, called RTA, or Refuse to Accept, explains that, and I'm gonna repeat this a few times just to be clear because I know there's been some misunderstandings here. The statute is in effect. FDA can and will enforce with respect to the provisions of the statute as of March 29th. From an administrative perspective, however, we are not going to refuse to accept or bounce back submissions that come in if they are missing certain administrative elements that are part of the new omnibus provisions. Instead, we will work in a collaborative and iterative and interactive way with the sponsor, with the manufacturer, to assure that those missing elements are appropriately included, submitted, addressed, any deficiencies or questions that come up, that those get explained, that those get properly clarified as well. Why are we doing this? We're essentially giving a bit of an on-ramp, recognizing that there is some time necessary for both manufacturers as well as for the FDA to put the even administrative processes in place, which currently exist, so that an application or a submission that comes in can be identified to assure that, again, from a triaging perspective, it's incorporating all of the elements. Hopefully that's clear, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards if not. So, I mean, where does cybersecurity apply? And here are, some specific kind of examples that we wanted to highlight in terms of whether this device, does the device contain software? Referencing back to the definition of a cyber device in the statute. Should that device meet the criteria? Then yes, cybersecurity documentation is necessary and required as part of that submission. Whether the software or the software component was designed by the original equipment manufacturer, the MDM, or a third party, that regardless, the cybersecurity considerations will apply. Examples of where risk is increased if the device contains one more of these interfaces. And important to think about, and we heard a little bit of this earlier this morning, but it's one that we all really have to kind of put our arms around, is that the considerations for cybersecurity are not merely limited to the device, but rather to thinking about the entire system. We have to be thinking about, again, the threat landscape, the environment, and how the system is appropriately protected. So how are we approaching reviews today? Again, 3 kind of buckets to think about it. I already touched a bit on the risk management piece as far as the design and development of devices. The management plan, which again is incorporates the part around patching, updating, how is that device going to be appropriately monitored throughout its life cycle, and then the third aspect being the labeling. Harkening back again to the 2014 cybersecurity guidance, this is an important go-to resource for manufacturers because we identify within there those components, those aspects that do need to be addressed as part of the design considerations and the development of that device. Traceability matrix that links the actual controls to the risks that were considered is an important aspect of the documentation that comes in. And as mentioned before, threat modeling. What is the risk assessment? What controls have been put in place? The software bill of materials and supporting information. What testing has been done? Are there unresolved anomalies? This is expected to be submitted as well. And traceability. So for manufacturers to be aware, there is help text in the eStar process, in the eSTAR submission process, that can assist or support on those different elements or components that were incorporated in that prior slide. Also to point to various resources that exist outside and within what FDA has published. We have the threat modeling playbook that FDA, MDIC, and MITRE worked on together, and that is a great resource to look towards. The post-market cybersecurity guidance provides what the expectations are with regard to vulnerability management patches and updates and what manufacturers need to do there. For SBOM, the NTIA's SBOM framing document, really great resource to use. And then we've got FDA recognized standards. And then finally, unresolved anomalies, looking at the pre-market software guidance would provide additional information or clarity there. So again, highlighting what the management plan includes, 524B1 is speaking to the monitoring, identifying, and addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities and exploits, and this includes coordinated vulnerability disclosure and related procedures. B2 and B2A speaks about making available those post-market updates and patches to the device and the related systems on a reasonably justified cycle for what are known unacceptable vulnerabilities. And then we take this to, again, the most highest risk, 524B2 and B2B, that talks about addressing those what one would call critical vulnerabilities, what we've called in our post-market guidance really uncontrolled vulnerabilities because of the types of risks that they expose patients to, that those need to be addressed as quickly as possible. And that means that they very well may need to be addressed out of cycle. I would encourage, again, going back to the 2014 guidance, which makes those recommendations around what needs to be incorporated in the documentation that one submits on the pre-market side as part of this plan for management, right? Again, parenthetically, let me say that the beauty, the unbelievably fantastic or phenomenal thing about the way the provisions are written is that we have the opportunity here to break that cycle of a legacy drag, legacy brittleness that we see today as a result of all the forethought that needs to go in terms of design and development of new devices, and making sure that that includes really thinking through the entirety of that device's life cycle, knowing that vulnerabilities are going to emerge at various times, and that there has been a plan, a management plan put in place, and that the device has been determined to be able to withstand the different types of updates and patches in order to minimize risk to patients. And then, of course, the post-market cybersecurity guidance is an important resource in terms of what constitutes an effective post-market cybersecurity program. Labeling is the third aspect of what a reviewer would be looking for in terms of assuring that the device instructions for use and the product specifications related to those recommended cybersecurity controls are matching up with or mapping to and appropriate for the intended use environment. And this should be consistent with the risk controls described in the risk assessment, as well as any other configuration items that are necessary on the computer or computing platform. And then instructions need to be incorporated that ensures a safe and effective use of the device. The examples that are included here, interfaces security control user interacts with, the MDS2, if that exists, the software bill of materials, if provided to customers as well. We recommend that that be part of the labeling, and then logging capabilities and forensic log capture. So I want to also provide, and in terms of, again, this road ahead, additional resources for cybersecurity in medical devices as a complementary kind of document, and that we are maintaining kind of live to issuance of the RTA on March 29th. We also put out a web page called FAQs, and I would encourage folks to take a look at those FAQs. We seeded them with some very basic ones that we expected manufacturers and others might have around the omnibus when it first came out. But please note that we will be continuously updating that FAQ page as more questions come to our attention, for which we are able to provide clear, succinct direction for and clarity for manufacturers. The other really kind of hot off the press items that are important resources for the ecosystem to be aware of is, as you know, and I think I talked about this even last year, that Health Canada and FDA have been co-chairing for years already now a cybersecurity working group as part of the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And there are two kind of complementary documents that we had first issued as draft guidelines that have just been finalized and posted on the IMDRF website. One is with respect to legacy principles and practices for the cybersecurity of legacy medical devices, and the other being principles and practices for software bill of materials for medical device cybersecurity. Important to highlight for this effort that this effort is unique in that most IMDRF initiatives involve the regulators that are part of the global regulators that are part of this, as well as the medical device manufacturers, the industry. But because these matters, legacy devices as well as the SBOM, are rather critical to healthcare delivery organizations, it was very important that we include within the working group healthcare delivery organization members as well, to be part of the process of crafting, of developing these guidelines and finalizing them. So, we're extremely proud of this particular effort, and a big shout out actually to Dr. Afton Ross, who really drove a lot of the work. Really, I'd say most of this work on the IMDRF efforts, and hopefully this will get also a lot of socialization over the next weeks, months, years. And so all this really is to say that, while we have faced in the past 10 years, in the past decade, and we know we are going to continue to face an endless uphill climb with many challenges that still have to be dealt with. We haven't really touched on the current legacy issues that we have at present. I will say that we at FDA, at CDRH, we remain relentless in our pursuit of a stronger posture with respect to cybersecurity of the medical device ecosystem. And that working together with all of you across the ecosystem, regardless of where you sit and what organization you are from, that we can advance and improve care of our patients, safe care of our patients, as well as the protection and the promotion of public health. And I'll make a note of the fact that I thought when Congresswoman Kelly spoke this morning, she talked about the importance of advancing health equity and reaching out to communities that are underserved or remote, rural. And I want to say that that vision and that commitment resonates strongly with us at CDRH. In fact, it is one of our strategic priorities that we are presently executing on. But the ability, or shall I say, and the ability to realize that potential of advancing health equities necessitates enabling technologies that have cybersecurity appropriately built into them from the start, so that we can reach people where they are, whether they are in some remote area that's not well populated with level 1, level 2, level 3 facilities. And with that, last message, I want to just thank everybody here for all of the extraordinary work that everyone has done in contributing to this as a collective. We still have a way to go, as I said, but I think that we are on a good path with what the omnibus has provided to us, and we now have to kind of roll up our sleeves and get things done. So thank you for that. And Josh, I channeled a bit of you earlier, but you weren't in the room at the time. But in any case, thank you so much for the partnership with I Am the Cavalry and the work that you and Bo have done. I don't think that we would be able to be where we are at present with not that kind of highly valued partnership. So thank you.
I wanted to ask you about the omnibus statute language as it defined the cyber device. You highlighted the first element, which was that it included software, to summarize it. But the second was that it connects to the internet. And I wanted to ask if you've observed or you're concerned about manufacturers taking a very narrow interpretation of what it means to connect to the internet and then using that to dock out of regulatory constraints.
Smiling at my team here. Smiling at my team. I heard the chuckle. Yes, because if you look carefully at the language, it's worded in such a way that it says it connects to the internet. It does not say it connects to the internet. It says, let me see if I can pull this up here. It can be, right? Has the ability. Has the ability is the principal language that we are utilizing in a broader interpretation. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz, for all you've done. I can't believe we're actually here talking about this after 10 years, and for everybody in this room that's contributed to all that you've done. From a post-market perspective, if there's negligence at the B2 level, can you comment on just enforcement? I know it's probably something you can't really talk about, but what would get the attention of the manufacturers from an enforcement perspective, in your opinion, to really pay attention if they're still negligent in what we're trying to accomplish here?
When you say B2 level, are you talking about the statute?
Well, yeah, in post-market.
Post-market.
Yeah, activities, yes.
Well, and we have in the past, actually, even prior to the omnibus going into effect, we've utilized enforcement as necessary. If you go back to the way our post-market guidance is actually written, and we explain, what actual regulatory incentive is in there, but if the criteria of that regulatory incentive are not met by the manufacturer, then there's an expectation, first of all, that certain recall-related actions need to occur, certain corrective actions or removal actions need to occur. And if that is not happening, then FDA has a number of different tools in our toolbox that we have at times needed to utilize. So, I'm not going to speculate about what that means in terms of how we're going to go out and enforce this in a different way than what we've done in the past, but recognizing that there's an expectation as we monitor, as we receive information around vulnerabilities that occur, that have been identified, and we assess those vulnerabilities. If we're not seeing a satisfactory type of response to the way that vulnerability is managed, then First thing we're gonna do is obviously try to work together with the manufacturer to rectify that, to remedy that. And it really will depend upon what kind of collaboration and cooperation we get from the manufacturer in that regard. Ultimately, where does this come back down to? You know, the safety of for the patient, the safety of the device. So if there's a unmitigated and uncontrolled risk that remains out there that we are highly concerned about and action is not being taken quickly enough, we have means in which to deal with that. You know, they don't necessarily even need to be initially enforcement. They'll be more communication means that will first and foremost address what our mission is, to protect the public health, to let providers, let patients and others know that there's an unmitigated risk that people should be aware of and how that should be dealt with. What kinds of potential measures might be taken in order to reduce that risk. Mari.
Hi, I'm Dr. Schwartz, and thank you, FDA. So grateful, utterly grateful. Kind of a miracle this made it over the finish line. One thought is on the enforcement piece, and this is sort of a wild card idea, but FTC, or another agency, right? FTC Act, Section 5 on unfair and competitive practices. Wondering if a manufacturer says that they're doing something, they say that they're cybersecure, they say that they've done something, and they actually are not. I wonder, has the FDA considered whether to work with your sister agency to perhaps shine a light on that?
So, Mari, I think, you know, whether it's cybersecurity or anything else, where we have, again, that kind of working relationship or partnership with other agencies in order to take a certain action or achieve a certain outcome that we're not able to do ourselves, we'll utilize those opportunities. But what I would want to highlight is the purpose of, you know, both of your questions. We're not coming out swinging here in terms of enforcement. There are a lot of other much more effective ways of doing the right thing and getting, you know, everybody to understand the importance of protecting patients here by virtue of making sure that devices are cyber secure. It is in, I think, everyone's best interest to really be able to take those other means by which, and those other actions prior to having to kind of escalate it to an enforcement-related action. I think folks probably understand that enforcement, or if not, enforcement actions in any case are far more protracted. To get an agency to the point where an enforcement action can actually be taken, you're probably well past the public health concern for the issue. So what we really want to be doing is being timely in addressing what the issue is in a manner so that the public, patients' family members feel as though they are being properly protected in whatever devices they rely upon for, for their health, for their life, for their use.
So, I come from a completely different world, but I will say this. There was a time, and there's still a time, where the FDA is the ultimate hammer, especially in the medical field. Now that we're into not really the medical field, which is cybersecurity, there are other players that come to play, and every agency has a way that they're addressing their cybersecurity requirements. And is it possible, I don't know how the omnibus reads, that you guys, the FDA, has the authority again to be the overriding agency? Because the president or the White House or the administration or whoever are signing different bills that require different types of cybersecurity. So I like the idea of having a single master. You can actually put medical companies out of business if you need to. No other agency can do that, but they also are dictating cybersecurity requirements that are not necessarily synergistic across the board. So what's the possibility, and specifically I know that you guys referenced the NIST guidelines, but there's also RMF, there's also CMMC, there's also ZTA. These are all initiatives, and they don't necessarily are homogeneous. So what's the possibility that the FDA is the ultimate authority? We meet that requirement, and everybody else says, okay, we leave this alone because it's a medical device.
Yeah, so an important question. I'll answer it in two parts. Number one, just to also further inform that we at FDA and specifically Center for Devices Radiological Health work very closely across multiple other agencies for sake of awareness and visibility of different efforts or different initiatives and what's happening on the standards front. So, to the extent that there could be concerns that need deconflicting or really understanding exactly where that overlap may reside, as far as what another agency is doing, we have had over the years, and we will continue to have a lot of cross-agency dialogue on that front. Some of that is actually even fully convened through the administration level, whether it's the National Security Council or ONCD, Office of National Cyber Director, where there's opportunity for each agency to speak to what its remit is and what its challenges are. So that's number one in terms of, and we've had in the past a lot of opportunity to work and to kind of work things out. But to your question as far as medical devices, from a standpoint of allowing those devices to go on the market, marketing authorization, FDA is the final arbiter. We are. No other agency has the oversight in terms of enabling or clearing or approving a device or a medical product for that matter, but here we're talking about devices to be marketed. So it is FDA's decision, as it reflects on the omnibus, to make that determination whether that device has met the bar of what is in the language now reasonable assurance of cybersecurity of the device and related systems. And a withdrawal, similarly, a removal or withdrawal from the market, really comes down to an FDA decision. Now, does that mean that we don't consider, again, other factors from other agencies? Of course we do. I mean, we have a lot of discussions, whether it's with the VA, DOD, VHA, other parts of the government as well that have healthcare systems within them and that have very specific security needs. But in terms of allowance on the market, that remains within FDA's remit.
1 minute?
Yeah, all right. Well, we can see what happens if you can both do this in 1 minute. Shannon.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks for your talk. I have a specific question. Now that FDA will be universally receiving SCOMs, is it conceivable that you might ingest them into software and look at the associated vulnerabilities internally at FDA?
It is conceivable. I'll leave it at that. That's a short answer, but it is conceivable. Yeah. Victor.
You have guidance documents which have been very useful, and you have this new legislation, the omnibus. What really gives you good handholds and milestones in the path upward would be regulations. Are there plans to propose regulations?
We don't right now. So obviously we have within the omnibus a provision that allows for, and at this time we don't see the need for additional regulations. We don't. I think we've got in statute what it states, and
In terms of enforcement and all that?
I think we have enough to go on, and that's not to say that something may not kind of percolate up as a gap in a year from now, 2 years from now, that we'll have to revisit, but for now, that's not something that we're envisioning.
What's your favorite Hamilton song?
You missed, so I have to say, just a second here, just a second, just to make this clear. We didn't collude on this. We did not, but we were both channeling each other and Hamilton because most of my slides had Hamilton references in them and you missed them.
I watched them.